I have taken refuge in the Lord. How can you say to me, escape to the mountains like a bird? For look, the wicked string bows. They put their arrows on bowstrings to shoot from the shadows at the upright in heart. When the foundations are destroyed, what can the righteous do? The Lord is in his holy temple. The Lord, his throne is in heaven. His eyes watch. His gaze examines everyone. The Lord examines the righteous, but he hates the wicked and those who love violence. Let him rain burning coals and sulfur on the wicked. Let a scorching wind be the portion in their cup. For the Lord is righteous. He loves righteous deeds. The upright will see his face. Yeah, the Bible records two occasions when David fled from Jerusalem: when King Saul turned against him, and then when Absalom, his own son, mounted his rebellion against him. Now, whether Psalms 11 was written on one of those occasions or in response to a different incident, it's not specified. I mean, David certainly would have faced many other threats during his time on the throne. And to be clear, Psalms 11 is not a prayer. It is a faith-filled response to those who were advising him to flee Jerusalem to a place of safety. What David ultimately decided is not revealed, but his confidence in the Lord is crystal clear. His words glow with faith in God and his power to protect David. In verses 1 and 2, David's advisors were urging him to leave Jerusalem for shelter up in the mountains. But note David's first thought at this advice: I trust in the Lord for protection. See, David realized that his life was in the Lord's hands. His confidence was not in the armies or the fortress or the isolated wilderness strongholds. He relied solely on the Lord God, who had made a covenant with him. Well, folks, as believers, we must be unshakably grounded in the truth. That truth being that our lives are ultimately in God's hands. All right, we as Christians must take a bold public stand against all forms of immorality. And as a result, sure, many furious enemies may rise up against us and may even threaten our life time and time again. But we must not be moved from our task, while at the same time frequently remind everyone that we are in the center of God's will and are invincible until God is finished with us. See, we Christians, we know a wonderful truth. The protection of God will shelter us, unless it was God's appointed time for our earthly life to end. We must trust God's will and power to protect us. Now, to trust God does not mean that we should act unwisely, all right? We should diligently care for our bodies, and we should not take foolish risks or fail to exercise caution and good sense. I mean, the Bible teaches that wisdom can prolong our lives, but we should not live in fear of what could happen to us. Sadly, some of us fret over potential dangers and things that could possibly harm us: disease, accidents, natural disasters, military attacks, random acts of violence, and a host of other threats. The fact is, each of us has an appointment with death. All right? Every human being since Adam has eventually died. We must trust the timing and the circumstances of our death to God, regardless of what the world may say. All right, example being COVID times. All right, we must not live in fear of what might be. Instead, We should live with the confidence that the Lord will protect us until he is finished using us and is ready to transfer us from these bodies to his heavenly kingdom. Now, David was not looking for a way to escape his problems. Therefore, he was not pleased with the counsel of his advisors. He was not like a scared bird, timid, skittish, and prone to fly away whenever trouble approached. I mean, the idea of leaving Zion for the mountains did not rest well with David. David's counselors, they meant well, and they were concerned for his and their safety. I mean, they urged David to focus on his foes, who were preparing their weapons to attack him. Now, their statements suggest that David's enemies were within the walls of Jerusalem. But David rebuked his advisors by repeating their words back to them. How could they suggest such a thing to him? Looking upon his enemies would require him to take his eyes off the Lord. See, when facing danger or opposition, he had always focused on the size of his God, not the size of his enemies. All right, the one who had strengthened him as a young shepherd boy to slay the lion, the bear, and the giant Philistine who defied the armies of the living God would not forsake him now. All right, the spirit of the young man who faced down Goliath with his sling and 5 smooth stones and his steadfast faith in God was unaffected by those who now bent their bows in an attempt to destroy him. Now, in verse 3, David's men panicked because they saw the foundations of their nation beginning to crumble around them. Well, friends, the spirit of escapism never ceases to plague faithless people. I mean, when a crisis strikes, the very first impulse for many is to run. I mean, countless people ruin their lives in an attempt to escape their problems. Think about it. Thousands have become addicted to drugs and alcohol because they repeatedly turned to these harmful substances for a few moments of relief. Every year, untold multitudes take their own lives because they feel they can no longer deal with their problems. And yes, sadly, even some professing believers commit suicide. Some people quit good jobs, move, or even divorce their spouses rather than deal with the challenges that confront them. This is not God's will. People who are prone to run from their problems only hide from them for a short time. Eventually, their problems catch up to them. They are still the same people they always have been. And unless they live in faith and persevere in the power of God, they will waste the rest of their lives running away and attempting to escape life's problems. We must face our problems with faith. God does not want us to go around them, but through them. All right? He promises the grace and strength to persevere through them. And when we come through the fires of affliction, we will be like precious gold, all right? Tempered, strengthened, and purified of the fleshly urges that hinder us from greater service to Him. In fact, here's the tweet of the day for y'all. There is no faith in fear, but there is no fear in faith. And I'm going to repeat that. There is no faith in fear, and there is no fear in faith. Seriously. As David said, what can the righteous do when the foundations of our nation crumble? I'm talking about when our nation, our community, our church, or home begin to crumble. The answer? Lay the foundation again. All right, each new generation must see that the foundation of truth and justice are solid. All right, Samuel laid again the foundations of the covenant in 1 Samuel, and Ezra laid again the foundations of the temple in Ezra 3. See, in spite of all his trials, David lived to make preparations for the building of the temple and the organization of the temple worship. During the checkered history of Judah, godly kings actually cleansed the land of idolatry and brought the people back to the true worship of the Lord. I mean, Christ's messages to the church in the book of Revelation make it clear, right, that local churches need constant examination to see if they are faithful to the Lord. And we need to pray for a constant reviving work of the Spirit. David, he refused to focus on the approaching threat of his foes and chose instead to fix his eyes on the Lord. His response to the fearful counselors was to proclaim God's faithful character. And I want you to note here 5 great facts about our unchanging God. All right. In verse 4, David reminded his advisors that the Lord sits on a higher throne than he did. All right. Israel and her king were under the rule of heaven. The Lord's throne was unthreatened by those who were rising up against the anointed king of his chosen nation. All right. From his seat on high, God could see every single detail of their actions against David. And then in verse 5, when the Lord discerns a righteous heart, he purifies and strengthens it. Now, the words examined or tries is use of refining metals in the fire. God uses opposition and crises in the lives of the righteous to purify and strengthen them. And David viewed the threats of his enemies as an opportunity for him to grow and become stronger in the Lord. Also in verse 5, when the Lord discerns wicked hearts, hearts filled with violence, his wrath is provoked. All right, he rises up in opposition against them and targets them for his judgment. Now in verse 6, David used 3 graphic images to describe God's judgment on the wicked. He says that God rains down judgment upon the wicked like he did in Sodom and Gomorrah. He drops his judgment down from heaven like snares or nets under which they are inescapably trapped. Then he says the second thing is his judgment destroys the wicked like a scorching, ravaging wind. Now, this was a familiar image in the Old Testament world. And then third, he says the wicked drink from the cup of God's undiluted wrath, like drinking full strength wine that immediately intoxicates and poisons the body. And the 5th fact about our unchanging God is found in verse 7. God hates wickedness, but he loves justice. He lifts his hand of judgment against the wicked, but he lifts his face or countenance towards the righteous. Now, this is a reference to the immediate favor of God upon the righteous, but it also speaks of the eternal reward of the redeemed. In contrast to the wicked, who will eternally drink the cup of God's wrath in the inescapable lake of fire. The righteous will forever dwell in the light of God's glorious presence. They will see his face. Brothers and sisters, to recap what I just laid out for y'all to pick up is this. What can the righteous do when the foundations are crumbling? First, stop looking around and look up where God is unthreatened and securely on his throne. All right. Second, know that God sees everything that is going on. He is constantly observing and examining us. Third, expect trials and temptations and actually rejoice in them as an opportunity for spiritual growth. Fourth, rest assured that God will eternally judge all who inflict violence on others. And finally, continue to walk in righteousness and live in hope of God's eternal reward for your faithfulness. For that and so much more, I say praise be to God. Thank you for watching. I pray this message reached you well. It did me as I was writing it. And I ask that if it did reach you well, please share it. Because honestly, you never know who needs to hear God's word today. I love you. Thanks for watching. God bless.